everyone, welcome to our first Tuesday talks. This is, of course, what used to be Third Thursdays, and we just moved it to Tuesdays. We're hoping that maybe some more members of the Mercer community can join us, because Third Thursdays overlapped with another event. But, of course, we're here with Heather and Habib and their guests. Thank you all for joining on the first talk. Just a couple quick announcements for the gallery. I'm Michael Chauvin-Dalton, the director of the gallery, for those who don't know. I'm going to be doing another live talk series. It won't be on any specific days. It's just sort of as I can book guests. But the next 2 Thursdays, not this one, but the next week and the following week, there'll be some live talks. So just check out jkcgallery.online for that. And now I'm going to hand it over to Heather and Habib. So thank you all.
I just got distracted with a puppy in the crowd.
There's a puppy.
There's a puppy. Forget Dale and CJ. This is
turn the camera on the puppy.
It's Morpheus.
Morpheus. Aww.
I love it.
You're going to be talking to your dog all day.
Yeah.
Me too, even though I can't see it.
Bring your own dog event.
We love it. We love it. So, I want to start off by, okay. Check. All right. Sorry about that, guys.
Oh yeah, make sure you talk into the mic.
It's been a while. Hey, everyone, thank you guys so much for being here in person and online. Thank you also, Morpheus, for joining us. This is our first event this season, Tuesday Talks. This is our newly named Third Thursday. And for those of you who've been attending our monthly events since 2020, you notice tonight's event is the exact same format, just with a new name, all right? Me and Heather, we started this event with Michael Chauvin-Dalton to bring the photography community together for inspiration, education, and fellowship. We've grown our audience and community and are so excited to welcome all of you back to the JKC Gallery. So a round of applause, air snaps.
Air snaps, okay.
Tonight we have 2 guests with us that we're very excited to feature. We had to start the season off with a bang, everyone. We have CJ Harker to my right, who's actually in person. Round of applause. And we also have Del Rio, who's joining us virtually tonight. I met CJ years ago at the Trenton. Hold on, let's say this. It was at Art All Night. It was Art All Night. And I first started photography, and I had my first DSLR camera, and I would see anyone that's taking pictures, I would ask him for advice, you know. And he was doing something so totally different. And the first thing he told me was just to shoot. And we kept in contact since. I'm super excited to have you in person tonight. All right.
Yeah, and then I invited Dale, who I met through knowing CJ as well from the Trenton Punk Rock Flea Market through the Halide Festival. And so yeah, I absolutely love Dale's work, so I was excited to invite her today. Dale is tuning in from Connecticut tonight. She's a historical and, claps for Connecticut. She's a historical and alternative process photographer. I love her not only for her work, but because she champions female identifying analog photographers through her exhibition curation and recently founding an initiative, Lux et Libera. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
It's a fake word. It's a fake word, so you can pronounce it however you want.
She received a BA in Studio Arts and Russian Literature from Smith College, an MFA with a minor in printmaking from Pratt Institute, and she's been awarded a Fulbright grant. She's received a Wingate scholarship to study the daguerreotype process, as well as attended residencies at Penland, which I would love to visit. She's been to Mass MoCA and the Farmington Valley Art Center. So her talk tonight is going to focus on her progression from early projects centered around the self towards her recent projects, which address issues much larger than any single individual. And CJ actually has been a friend of the gallery for a really long time. He is an alumni of Mercer County Community College, and he was the inaugural solo exhibition at this gallery for
Yes.
his work,
Cool.
Trenton Blacksmiths, which is awesome. So we've known him for years here and love his work. He went on to receive a BFA from UArts. He spent a summer at Peters Valley Craft School in northern New Jersey as a photography studio assistant, and his work has been featured in several national publications. He's won numerous awards, and his presentation tonight is going to focus on his current projects. You can also see online and in person, he's got a whole table of just amazing historical process photography and wooden spoons that he's carved. I'm impressed. But both CJ and Dale are co-founders of the Halide Project in Philadelphia, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting the continued practice and appreciation of film and historical process photography. They have a community darkroom there, a classroom, and a gallery space. It's in Kensington, Philadelphia. And I'd love for the two of them to actually tell you tonight, if you guys don't mind, a little bit about what you're doing there. We would love to support you as you support us. I think we're good, like Trenton and Philadelphia, good sister cities. So yeah, I know Dale is going to go first tonight. CJ is going to go after. As always, we'll do Q&A at the very end. Please put your questions in the comment box. Leave comments while they're speaking. We'll keep the chat box going. And then maybe Dale, I don't know if you want to talk about Halide now or later. It's totally up to you. I'm going to let Dale take over.
Well, maybe we can talk about Halide, both of us, a little bit at the end. Does that make sense? Like,
That's good.
as a precursor to the Q&A?
That sounds great. I
Cool.
love it. Awesome.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to turn my video off because you don't need to see me, and I'm going to start my screen share. Hopefully it works. All right, you guys can see that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so in putting this talk together tonight, I wanted to sort of focus on my progression because through Halide, I host a lot of artist talks, and I also attend a lot of artist talks. And it can often seem like people's artistic journeys consist of a straight line or a very clear progression. And so I actually wanted to share my journey a little bit because it's convoluted and super nonlinear. And I'm currently working through some challenges and some issues. And I felt like that might be a bit refreshing, a little bit different than your typical artist talk, which makes the pathway forward seem very clear. So, and there are artists who sort of stick with one process or a subject. They kind of find something that works and stick with that. And there are others who are all over the map. And I used to kind of be the former, but lately I've been falling into that latter camp. And on one hand, I feel like it's wonderful to be open-minded and always be learning, having that open-mindedness of a student, and you're always challenging yourself in new ways by learning new processes or shooting in a different vein, but it can be frustrating. So I just wanted to start with that, which is awesome. Thank you guys. And thanks for the excellent introduction, both of you, and Heather in particular with the details. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
So in grad school, Heather mentioned I went to Pratt, and in grad school, I started out working a lot with family history and personal stories. And I did a lot of experimenting with process to find the best way for me to combine image and text. And yeah, Heather mentioned also that I wound up minoring in printmaking because of all the experimentation I was doing. I took a lot of printmaking classes, but I still never found a method that provided the results I was hoping for. And I was searching high and low for some of this older work. And unfortunately, I couldn't find any. So I apologize for not having any of that really early stuff to show you that did combine image and text and personal stories and family stories. So apologies for that. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. So my first cohesive project was my MFA thesis, and it was a self-portrait series called A Gallon of Gas and a Match. And like a lot of young people, I was trying to make sense of the world around me by creating art in response to it. And once again, the concepts behind the images came from personal stories, things that I'd experienced or conversations I had with people, conversations I overheard. I did a lot of eavesdropping, societal constructs and stories I heard about or read about in the news. So it was a lot of external sources that I internalized and then constructed these visual narratives around. But again, I hadn't really been satisfied with my combining of image and text. So the text in this project was relegated to the titles of these individual images. And so after I graduated, I'd continue working on this series sort of off and on as I got inspired. But that's when I first also experienced like a shift outwards, kind of away from myself. And I was out in the world, I was traveling extensively, doing freelance work, a lot of which was portrait-based or people-based. And then I also did environmental portrait projects that told the stories of the people who I encountered while I was traveling. And many of the people who I photographed, both for commercial and freelance work, but also my personal work, sort of existed outside of what was mainstream, considered mainstream at the time, whether they were from some kind of subculture or indigenous group. And I felt pretty strongly about representation and representing these people sort of beyond stereotypes and misjudgments. I thought that was very important. And there often was actually a text component with with these environmental portrait projects that I was working on, where I interviewed the people so that their own words accompanied their images. And I developed a pretty collaborative way of working with the people who I photograph that I still use. All right, so fast forward to about 10 years ago, and I found myself in a very different place, both physically and mentally. And this was sort of the beginning of a shift even further kind of outside of myself. And that shift is continuing to this day. So I really want to focus on issues that I found most pressing. And one of those was climate change and the environment, man's relationship to the natural world. And the second of which exists within the domestic sphere, including sexual and domestic violence. And these are the types of projects that I'm currently focusing on today. And I'll start with that latter category of kind of the domestic sphere, because that coalesced for me more easily into kind of tangible, identifiable projects. So in 2018, I started another environmental portrait project, sort of building on the foundation that I had created with previous portrait projects that I had done. And this project features survivors of sexual assault portrayed in a way that depicts their strength as self-defined. And so it was conceptualized partly in response to the Kavanaugh hearings, and the project, which is called Look at Me, seeks to recontextualize and redefine concepts and terms such as victimhood and victimization, but also share survivors' varied experiences and their individual paths to strength. And so this project is incredibly collaborative in nature, again, sort of building off the process that I developed with collaborating with the people who I photograph. And so these people take part in every aspect of the process. So choosing their location, what they're wearing, how they want to be depicted. They take part in the editorial process, both with the images and the text, because I do interview them and I'll send them the text to give me feedback on, to make sure that their words are representing them in the way that they choose, in the way that they feel best expresses their experience and their strength. And then more recently, I started a project that explores kind of an unfortunate reality that was highlighted during the pandemic, that the very place that's supposed to represent safety and comfort can be threatening or even a dangerous place for people. So in this series, I scratch phrases of implied violence and threat into the domestic or within the domestic sphere into negatives of images of houses. So there's a violence that's inherent in the physical action of damaging the negatives, and that echoes the implied violence in the phrases, but also contrasts with the seemingly innocuous depictions of domestic architecture. So this is an ongoing project. And then when the pandemic hit, during the strictest lockdown period, I was lucky enough to have a studio residency here in Connecticut, near where I was working at the time. And this is a project that I worked on during that residency. And it addresses assimilation and the loss of culture. And once again, I wanted to incorporate the text, but this time I felt really strongly about incorporating the text directly into the images. And I'm sorry if you can hear that, but a thunderstorm just started where I am. So sorry if you're hearing some thunder. So yeah, I wanted to literally incorporate the text into the image. So I shot the images on metal using the wet plate collodion process, which I'm sure CJ will talk about more when he's up. So what I did in this project was, again, I photographed things that were seemingly innocuous, but that related to stories of assimilation. And like my earlier work, these stories came from family histories, but also external sources. So I was listening to a lot of immigrant stories. And then I hand stamped these text pieces, and they're all first person, into the plates. And these short pieces of text sort of sum up how the objects represent assimilation. And so I use these short first person pieces of text because I wanted them to simultaneously be personalized, in that they're first person, but also kind of non-specific enough that they could be generalized to a wide variety of demographic groups. So you can see with these previous projects, I think, like, I'm usually a very project-based photographers, but now we're going to move into kind of my climate and environmental work, and it gets a little chaotic going forward. So you might want to strap in. In the beginning, I kind of like my entry point with this subject matter. I kind of used subjects and places and techniques that I was already, sorry, that someone had a question. So yeah, I kind of used
well, just use mine, bro. I don't care.
Mute.
I don't.
Make sure everyone's muted.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, so I started sort of in a comfortable spot for myself. Like, I was photographing things and places and using techniques, everything that was sort of familiar or comfortable with me, such as photographing abandoned sites to make a statement on, like, industrialized societies, wastefulness of resources. I also used portraiture to share the stories of people who are working on the front lines of environmentalism, like wildlife rangers and participants in the Maasai Olympics in Kenya. But again, so the pandemic hit, and like a lot of people, it affected my work. And I wasn't able to travel, which is kind of the foundation of a lot of the work that I do. So I fell down a really deep rabbit hole of research that I am still very much in. And this is just an example of some of the books that I have read during this period. And there's stacks and stacks more. But one of the first things I came across, all the way on the left, you see Seneca's Natural Questions. And he's a Stoic philosopher for people who might not be familiar with him. but yeah, that was kind of the entry point into like a big rabbit hole of research. And a quote from him actually found its way into my work, and is part of an ongoing series that I have to pick up on. But yeah, I was doing some cyanotype work at the time, and his quote found its way in there. So when travel restrictions lifted, I went to Iceland, and what really impressed me about Iceland, it kind of blew me away, is how evident geologic time is there. So there's a fresh, cooled lava flow, and then there are fields of volcanic rock and the black sand beaches all existing simultaneously. And it's like creation and destruction living side by side, and then the idea, that concept of geologic time versus human time. And oh no, it doesn't look like this will play. Maybe it'll play. Okay, so I'm just going to play this while I talk a little bit. That concept of time, the idea of time and destruction, kind of coexisting with creation, and destruction playing out over time or being sped up by something like climate change. It got me thinking of incorporating time. How can I incorporate time into my work? And I'm kind of a relatively literal rather than a conceptual type of artist. So yeah, this is a test run video where I took a cyanotype of a rocky coastal area that's being affected by climate change, and I burned it clearly. So this is definitely there's a lot of experimentation that I've been doing with different processes and just techniques, and getting a little less literal and a little more conceptual in my work, which is definitely a challenge for me. So this was kind of the first shot at this, and I've recorded a little bit more video that I still have to put together, but yeah, that's yet another direction my work is going in. All right, so that's about it for that. And then, so a lot of what I've been talking about, or I am interested in, is kind of the man's relationship with the natural world, both how we can affect it and how it can affect us. I've been doing a lot of reading on how natural events in one part of the world can have like catastrophic outcomes in other places. So that's another direction my work is going in. But I'm also really interested in decoupling nature from humanity, because I don't have a particularly anthropocentric view of nature. I feel it has value outside of what humans assign to it. So, but it's really hard to escape the interconnectedness. So this is another ongoing project that I have, where I use pinhole photography, and I'm doing self-portraiture in natural environments. And because of the long exposures that are required by pinhole, I become kind of transparent. And I feel that kind of visually levels the playing field between humanity and nature, and then reinstates a bit of a balance between the two. And then just quickly, I mentioned attending a lot of artist talks, and there was one that I attended a couple of weeks ago, and the speaker mentioned the idea of allowing a place to express itself through a person's images. And for some reason that really hit home for me, and it made me think of the way I collaborate with my human subjects in my environmental portrait work, and how it might be possible to apply that method of collaboration in visual storytelling to place. And so that might seem kind of obvious, but for some reason it really grabbed me. The idea of sort of getting yourself out of the way and really paying attention to a place and how it might want its story to be told. And then also not imposing preconceived ideas or specific goals or outcomes on it. So that kind of gave me a little bit of a new insight or meaning to the environmental portraiture that I've been doing for quite a while. Thinking of applying it to place. So your head might be spinning a little bit, and maybe that gives you some insight into how mine always feels, and just trying to figure out the direction, what might be the right direction to take my work in, and meanwhile going in all directions. Yeah, I'm like pulled in different directions. Like there's the creation versus destruction, or concurrent with destruction, beauty and volatility, humanity and nature, and the decoupling of the two. And yeah, I have some travel plans. I'm going to go do a residency in the Finnish boreal forest, go to some volcanically active places, and urban areas that bear traces of past climate and societal upheaval. So there's a lot going on, and where it's going to all end up, who knows? But it's part of the process, and I enjoy all of it. And so I know I'm kind of probably running out of time, but Heather mentioned the Halide project, and CJ and I could talk a little bit about that later once he's done. So it was founded in 2015. And like Heather said, it's our sole mission is the support of film and historic process photography and photographers. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but a couple other things that I've launched or helped found or co-founded. The 2020 Photo Festival is actually going on right now in Philly. Our core weekend is the weekend that's listed in this graphic. We do have online events throughout the month, every Monday and every Tuesday evening. And there are satellite shows throughout the month. And then again, our core weekend with lots of in-person events is the 22nd to the 25th. So you could go to our website if you want to find more information on that. I also started a print publication called Point A to Point B Analog Explorations. And it features the work of artists who were exploring concepts of place using film and historic processes. So Sandy Davis, who's in the audience, is designer extraordinaire. And we're working on our 4th issue right now. It comes out twice a year. And then also Heather mentioned Lux et Libera, and it's it's an initiative really right now, focused on women working in film and alternative processes. And we've done some panel discussions. One of the shows that's up at Halide for 2020, the festival, not the year, is a Lux show, and it features the work of 8 female artists based in or around Philadelphia who are working in film and alternative processes. Yeah, and every month we do a work share where people can bring their work and share it with the group, get some feedback. Yeah, so that is about it. I will stop my screen share.
Del, I want to thank you very much. I want to turn it over to CJ.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right, give me a second here. I'm gonna do a little setup here. I did the wrong camera. Let me do that. All right, let's move that pin. There we go. Okay, so I'll start the slideshow here. Interesting. Okay. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again for the introductions. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for signing in this evening. My name is CJ Harker. I'm a skateboarder, photographer, craftsman, and educator. Born here in Trenton, New Jersey, and currently in Philadelphia. I started skateboarding and making images before I was a teen, and consider myself very lucky to still be able to continue to do both. I went to school for photography here at Mercer County Community College with Michael Dalton. And this is where I was introduced to the darkroom and creating handmade photographs. From here, I moved on to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and around the same time, a friend of mine started a magazine called Skate On. We got some
That's very loud.
rap boys outside here.
You have thunder, we have motorcycles.
Yeah. So yeah, Skate On has been a continuous, steady outlet for. Oh, sorry. Skate On has been a continuous outlet for this work for me. Very grateful for that, but I feel even more fortunate to be so involved in what is an extremely valuable resource for our community as far as sharing what's going on in different little corners of our scene. And yeah, everybody just getting a little bit of shine. So those were some covers that I've shot over the years with friends, and most of the work that we'll see tonight is stuff that's either been in the magazine already or will likely be in the future. So there's also a lot of different creative stuff happening in the periphery of skateboarding, and I'm very thankful again to be so close to that and have so many talented friends that are involved in both. So we'll look at a little bit of work here from the past few weeks leading up to an event that was this past weekend. One of the large skateboarding distribution companies hired my friends Fifth Pocket Skate Parks to build a bunch of ramps and turn an old classic Chevy into a skatable work of art for a few events around the city. It was a whole lot of work leading up to it, but many hands make that work light. So on Friday, we all loaded up all the ramps onto a trailer, buttoned everything up, and delivered them to the event, followed closely by the Hell Camino. So, of course, after getting everything on the trailer and getting ready to roll out, we had to get the day started with a nice smoky burnout. So from there, we moved on to the events, and there wasn't a contest. These were invitational events. So basically, the gnarliest people in the industry just coming out to do their thing and have a good time for one of the biggest crowds I've been a part of, whether skateboarding or anything else. This was just a huge event. Everybody had a great time. As far as I know, the ambulance didn't have to cart anybody off. And the El Camino, or Hell Camino, made for entertainment for spectators and the skaters. Sorry. Yeah, all day and into the night. So the second part of the weekend was at, again, one of the gnarliest places on the East Coast, FDR Skate Park. So the distribution company dumped a bunch of money in there too, and they had created a few extra crazy obstacles for the weekend. But yeah, it was just more mayhem on the second day, and everybody had a great time. And that guy is 22 feet up in the air under the I-95 bridge there. And after the events were over, we were able to pack the ramps back up and bring them here to Trenton to Freedom Skate Park down in the Roebling Wireworks building. That way we get to infuse the local scene with a bit of extra stoke for the indoor skating season. Again, like I said before, I feel very fortunate to have Skate John as such a consistent outlet for this type of work. But I think that work might be a bit too strong of a word for it. Really, I'm just getting out and playing in the dirt and mud with my friends any chance that I can get. Same thing we've been doing since we were kids. Just documenting as much of it as I can. But I feel like the most difficult part really is just not being able to do two things at once. Doesn't really work to get in there and then grab a camera right afterwards. So I kind of have to divide my time. But being so close to and documenting such creative and inspiring people is certainly reward enough. Yes, and again, just very grateful to be where I am, and yeah, just be making photographs of these people. So yeah, that was just a few photos of my buddy's backyard, and you know, a couple trucks of concrete, and now they have a little mini skateboard park behind their garage. You know, and these are some photos that we took while the concrete was still drying. You know, you just got to get right out there. So yeah, this is all just super enjoyable stuff for me. It's not terribly dense or theoretical in any way. It's pretty much just eye candy for the most part. But being able to put this stuff out there in the magazine and let my friends get their shine, but also just show people around the country and around the world what we've got going on down in Philadelphia and Trenton. Yeah, I'm very grateful for it all. So yeah, just a few more real ridiculous photos of my buddies flying through the air. So the next couple are interviews that have been in the magazine in the past year or so. Most of this work is made without much direction or expectation, really. Once in a while, we'll have a loose idea of what we want to do for a day, but generally it's just capturing controlled chaos for the most point. You know, and sometimes it'll take months or a year or longer to put together enough stuff to have an interview or like an article in the magazine. But again, there's no pressure. We're all pretty much out here just doing it for the love of it. And when we can put something cohesive together and it runs in the magazine, it's just, it feels that much more special than, you know, the daily stuff. Which, again, it's something that I don't think any of us take for granted, that we get to just be out here kicking around a wooden toy and, you know, people are excited to see it. So yeah, maybe we could just kind of skip through a couple of these and get to a little bit of the tintype work. When I was at University of the Arts, I was introduced to Peters Valley by Alida Fish, one of my instructors. So I spent, okay.
You want to jump
Yeah,
ahead?
yeah, no, you're good there.
Okay.
We should catch up. Yeah, so I was introduced to Peters Valley and went up there and spent a month assisting different workshops. And I learned more historic practice stuff that is still with me today. Mostly tintype, which we'll be getting to here shortly. That's a process that I was basically hooked on from the first photograph that I made. Like Dale mentioned it before, but basically it's a Civil War era Polaroid is how I describe it to a lot of people. Each photograph that you make is an in-camera positive, and there's no editing of the image. You only get one, and you get what you get. If you don't like it, you got to do another one. And they're generally never the same twice because the whole process is done in hand. There's no like tray processing or mechanized part of it. You're just pouring chemistry on a plate and manipulating it by tilting the plate and moving it around. So these images are made the same way that they were made in the Civil War. The chemical recipes are the same. Everything is mixed from scratch. The only thing that really differs in my work is portraiture-wise. Occasionally I'll do natural light, but most of the time is with large studio strobes. And that's just in order to freeze the action and just end up with a really crisp readable portrait. If I were to shoot natural light, these portraits are typically, a second or more in exposure, and, it can be pretty tough for the average person that isn't practiced in it to sit still and, breathe consistently to make a sharp image. So big studio flash freezes them, and everybody's usually happy. But yeah, so most of the work that I do in tintype is portraiture, but a lot of what we just saw, those landscapes or scenes, are work from Smithville Park out in Mount Holly. I was invited out there for a historical fair just to hang out and demonstrate the tintype process and talk to people about it. And that work and more will be there next spring for a show in their galleries. That'll be opening on April 20th. So it'll be tintypes from the space and likely some of my platinum prints from the Trenton Blacksmith series that I did just after school. And yeah, everybody should come check it out. But yeah, so I guess that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's not really very deep or conceptual as far as my work goes. It's straight photography for the most part. But for me, it's the process of making these images that really keeps me coming back to it. The digital stuff is fun, and it kind of necessary for the medium, the magazine. It's great to see that stuff in print and know that it's being shared far and wide and other people are seeing it, but the satisfaction really kind of ends with pushing the shutter for me. I don't really enjoy the time spent at the computer, and I feel like even though I have control over every little thing, I feel like I don't have that much control over the final product. And that's where the tintype stuff and the other printmaking processes really shine for me. Is that I know that I've had my hand on this image from the time it was in my brain to the time that it ends up being a final tangible item that will last for hundreds of years. So along that same vein, I'm also, like I said, I'm a craftsman. I enjoy crafting images, but I also enjoy crafting other things with my hands as well. So mostly woodworking. Should be no surprise that my favorite thing is carving. So split a log and use an axe and a knife and turn it into a spoon. That's what I spend most of my free time doing. But I use machines when I have to. Build regular furniture and cabinets and stuff like that. But again, I always come back to these handmade processes. And so I guess maybe just a little segue into Halide Project from that is basically what we're aiming to do with the space is show people these handmade photographic processes and also to give them a space to learn and practice that as well. So our community darkroom is open to the public. All you need to do is take a short orientation and sign up for membership, and you're able to come in and develop your own film, make prints, take workshops, and basically we're gearing up to be a full service, everything under one roof. We'll eventually have shooting studio, print finishing and mounting, so you can come in and develop some film that you've shot, make some prints, put them in a frame, and yeah, the whole deal.
Do you want to tell us about some of the items you brought in since Michael's showing
Sure, yep.
them on the
So
screen?
right now we're looking at mostly tintypes, some images that we saw during the slideshow. The cyanotype at the bottom is similar to the tintype. It's made from a collodion negative instead of a positive, which is what the tintypes are. So instead of shooting on a opaque piece of black metal, the exposure is made on clear glass and processed just slightly differently to give it more density, and then we can print from that. So that was an experiment with that process. And next to it, there's a traditional silver print that was one of the first prints from the first printing session in the halide darkroom. Again, surrounded by more tin types up top. And in the middle now is a platinum print, and that was a test image from the Trenton Blacksmith series that I did. Under that, a couple peel-apart Polaroids. And there's another silver print. And above that, we've got 2 casein prints. So it's very similar to gum printing, but instead of a gum arabic, it's milk protein, casein, and the dichromate for light sensitizing, and then the pigment is just graphite powder. Those images were made from 11 by 14 paper negatives, just using regular Ilford enlarging paper instead of film in a view camera. And those were some spoons. Spoon plug, no power tools, no sandpaper, all by hand. Thank you.
Awesome. That was amazing.
Thanks.
Awesome.
So I guess we have about 11 minutes left, which is perfect. We'll do our Q&A. I did post a few questions in the Q&A myself, and there's a couple others as well. The last question that came in was from Wayne, and maybe Dale, since you're on a computer, you can type in Halide's address for them so that they can recommend it to someone in Philadelphia. Thank you, Dale. Do you want to field the questions? Or do you want me to ask them since they're mine?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, why don't you ask those your questions?
Well, there's a question that's not from me.
Okay. Go ahead. You
Kind of,
ask.
sort of. Harvier, is that a student of
Yep.
yours? So Harvier said that to CJ that she liked the fact that most of your skateboarding photos weren't blurry, even though they were taken of moving people. And I responded to them that we can ask you if you want to give like a little bit of insight into the technique.
Absolutely. A fast shutter speed doesn't always do it. What it takes is flash, off-camera flash. On-camera flash will freeze your action, but it's usually a pretty flat and consistent look. So the thing that I enjoy very much about skateboarding is being able to very specifically sculpt the image with those off-camera flashes, usually 2 or 3 of them. And what happens is whatever part of your subject that typically would be blurry, if that's hit with the flash, it freezes that action. So if I only have a flash on one side of a person, that side will be sharp and the other side will still be blurry. But if you basically envelop them in flash, it freezes all sides of them and everything stays nice and crispy.
And that's something that I think your expertise in being a skateboarder is probably really helpful with, because you can envision where they're going, what they're doing, because you're doing off-camera flash.
Yep. So it definitely helps a lot to be very in tune with what's going on, just as far as like where it's going to look best from and where the best places to put the flashes are to really like accentuate the movement and the location. Yeah, it's something that I've kind of just built up the vision for after a long time.
Broke that down so simply, the way you just broke that down, because from experience, I've been to a skate park with my camera, and the other photographers look at me like, like, what are you doing, you know? But I speak to them, and I tell photographers all the time, it's such a different feel, and it's all about the flash. But the way you broke it down, very simple. I love it.
Thank you.
We have a couple more questions. Definitely see one from Lang.
Oh, yes. You can ask it.
Why did you choose to photograph the blacksmith space?
Man, that was a fun one. So, I mean, the blacksmith shop is in the middle of Trenton.
Is it on Alton Avenue?
Yep.
Yeah, I drive by it all the time. and I
Exactly.
always wanted to stop in there.
She just answered the question. All right, you're good. So that was the whole reason that I popped in there. Like, I've been driving by it my whole life, and it's a tiny little brick building with a couple little chimneys, but it looks very unassuming, but there's always like a little bit of smoke coming out of the chimneys. It's like, I know something's going on in there. And when I was transferring from Mercer County to Philadelphia to go to UArts, I just like, I don't know, I had this itch that I had to scratch. I was like, I have to just stop in before I move out of Jersey for good, whatever, I'm back all the time. But like, before I move out of here, I gotta pop in and see what's going on in this little building. And the blacksmith that runs the place, Sasha, was very welcoming. You know, from the first time that I showed up, we had great conversation, and he invited me back to hang out, shoot photos anytime that I wanted. So, yeah, basically, you know, I would once or twice a month when I was coming back up here to like hang out with friends or go skate or whatever, I would make it a point to get out early, get up to the blacksmith shop, and just, you know, burn a couple hours there, just shooting shit with the guys, and just like, it's a 200-plus-year-old shop that's been operating the whole time. So there's so much stuff in there. It's just so densely packed with like history and junk and their workflow, and like you can totally see like how everything happens in there, and it's just very interesting. And I was very grateful to be able to be invited into a space like that. That's usually like, I wouldn't want to say off limits, but like there's not a lot of people that hang out around the blacksmith shop, you know. So being able to like see that and make the work there it just felt good, and it felt like, you know, a worthwhile thing to spend my time on. And then after I graduated from UArts, Addison over at Artworks saw some of that work and asked me if I would be willing to show it in the community gallery. So it was kind of like a no-brainer. Trenton Blacksmith, Trenton Community Gallery, you know, let's do it.
It's interesting too, because the images are on metal. Like, you're crafting with your hands on metal of a blacksmith whose, you know, job it is to make things from metal.
Yep. And I was lucky enough that the blacksmith and his apprentice were both willing to put their work in the show with the photographs that I made of them.
That's cool.
They each had a sculpture in the show, which that just made it feel extra special for me that they backed it like that.
Is it a family-owned business? Has it been in the same family?
It's passed through a couple families, and it was going to be like from one family to another again, but the kid that was there as an apprentice while I was there decided to step away from it. You know, just growing up type of thing. Like, he was been there since he was like 12 or 13. So by the time he hit like 16, 17, he was like, I just want to go, you know, girls and friends, whatever. But the plan had been to pass it to him. But there's another apprentice there now who's, you know, a little older and heavily invested in blacksmithing. I haven't been up to chat with them in a year or so I don't.
So
I'm coming
before
back
we run out of time, there is a
yes.
question from Christian to Dale. A practical question: recommendations on traveling with gear, basically heavy camera equipment, photosensitive materials. I mean, that's something from you know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you have an assistant or someone who doesn't mind being a pack mule, that's great. But I always travel by myself, so I don't have those. So I'm used to being my own pack mule. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I have a camera bag right there that I bought, and it fits. I have a small Dynalite 2-head lighting setup, so that camera bag will fit battery, 2 heads, camera equipment, like a fabric backdrop that I wrap everything up in so nothing gets smashed. But then I'll always have a second camera bag to put in like cameras and lenses, smaller things that might actually get smashed. But that bag is actually small enough to fit in an overhead bin, although it can get quite heavy. So just like strategically packing. I also, if I was going somewhere for like a month or 3 months, which I used to do a lot, I have like a regular suitcase that I could take my tripod apart and it fits in there. So I would put my tripod in there and all my clothes and stuff. I would also put a lot of my clothes in this bag to give my lights more padding. I never had any problem with, like, nothing's ever broken or anything like that. It might not be the smartest thing. If you can get like a rigid bag or some kind of a box to put your stuff in, that's probably a little more safe. But this was affordable and I've never had a problem with it. As far as, I mean, yeah, and you have to make choices too, like what you feel like you can carry. So sometimes if I'm going to a place where I don't want to carry a 4x5 camera, I'll bring my medium format camera. And as far as photosensitive materials, I always put my film in a lead bag. And in the US, if you ask to have it hand checked, they have to hand check it. They will complain and make you wait longer than you really need to just to be spiteful. So like factor in extra time for going through TSA, but they'll just ask for a hand check. Sometimes that could get tricky if you're in other countries and they don't have the same policy, but usually if you explain it to them, they will do a hand check.
Can I chime in on the hand check real quick?
Yeah.
One time when I was traveling recently, the TSA guy that I asked for a hand check told me that my film undergoes more radiation on the flight than it does going through the X-ray.
Yeah.
Like, cool. Good to know.
Good. Do your job anyway. Yeah. Yeah. And so I used to work in a lab and I've seen a film that's been X-rayed. And so I just, I'm really insistent. And I add in that buffer of like an extra half hour, an hour or whatever when I'm traveling, just to make sure that if they're going to be annoying about it, that it doesn't affect me. I still have plenty of time to get to my flight. That said, though, I have been, again, like in foreign countries where they just don't do this, or you're not able to communicate well, and I'll take a chance and put it through the X-ray machine like once on the way back, and it's okay. I've never had any X-ray waves on my own film, and again, I still have a lead bag. So sometimes they'll say like, put it through the machine, and if you put it through the machine, the lead bag just shows up as a big blob, so then they'll want to hand check it anyway.
Yeah, it's just more suspicious.
Exactly. Yeah, but you're right. So like while I'm flying on the plane, my film's in a lead bag. So
That's smart.
There you go.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Thank you so much.
sure.
So we are on the hour, and so Heather, I don't know if you had one particular question for Dale that you maybe wanted to get into the show, and then we can do some post-show Q&A as well. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you guys can wrap it up.
I have to reread my questions. I think I guess I'll ask about the text. I really like that you were incorporating the text, and I was wondering where that inspiration came from, if it's something you learned with your printmaking background, and then if I asked if you were planning on incorporating it into your current projects, and right as I pressed enter, you like showed the cyanotype with the text on it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But not many photographers include text. So like, where did that inspiration come from? What motivates you to include text? Are you something you're going to follow through with for future projects?
Yeah, I mean, before I picked up a camera, I thought I was going to be a writer. Like when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a writer. When I was a kid, my mom raised me by herself, but she also put herself through an English PhD program while I was a kid. And so like my spelling and grammar is perfect. But we didn't have a TV, we read. And so reading and writing has always been really important to me. And so I still read a ton, like that rabbit hole that I'm in right now is all reading and research. So it's always been really important to me. And yeah, just incorporating text and image has always been something that I've done. So it's just kind of a natural combination for me. And then, yeah, so like in the cyanotype that was in the slideshow and it's behind me here, I'm doing some experimenting with that, incorporating not just the quote from Seneca, but from some other writers or philosophers, and then doing the cyanotypes with the text physically incorporated into them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Close it.
Yeah, I guess we'll close up. So thank you both to Dale and CJ for being here tonight. This was awesome.
Thank you for having
I'm
us.
feeling inspired. I'm sure everyone is. So just thank you so much for taking the time, for being here, for sharing with us.
Thank you.
I'm gonna lost for words, guys. I love the way we kicked off this season. Thank you guys. You inspiring me to shoot more film. Definitely.
Love to hear it.
Oh,
Mission complete.
Yes.
make sure you guys check out their project. I know I will be spending a lot more time in Philadelphia, out there getting on CJ's nerves.
No doubt.
But
Oh.
definitely, guys.
Can I jump in just real quick? One thing about Haley too is like one really important thing to us, like part of our mission is to make everything affordable. So like CJ mentioned, like to print, you have to get a membership, but the membership is like not very expensive at all. So we try to keep our fees down really low for both printing and the workshops that we run. So I just wanted to mention that too, because it's really important to what we're doing, making it accessible.
Right. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so we're not trying to line our pockets. We're trying to keep the lights on.
Shout out to all the broke artists out there. So
Yeah.
come through. And if you as you know, guys, I think it's very important what you're doing for the community, definitely for photography. JKC, guys, it's another
Thank
season.
you.
Let's go.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for everyone for
Thank
attending. You know, just stay tuned for jkcgallery.online. Get on the mail list and the VIP list, and we have a lot of events coming up this fall. So
Yeah,
thank you all.
October 11th is our next one. So
Yeah,
we'll
please
see you
announce
guys
that.
then. Yeah, David, Timothy, and Phoenix Robles will be with us. So
Awesome.
yep.
All right.
See you then, Mark.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Thank you all.
Everyone, thanks so much.